Good evening, y'all warm and toasty? I love the kind of warm fuzziness of Christmas Eve. It's great. My name's Gene Binder. I'm one of the pastors here on staff at Cornerstone Boulder. But because of my Jewish heritage, people affectionately call me Rabbi Gene, but you can just call me Gene. I like that the best. So looking ahead several hundred years before the Messiah's birth, one of the Jewish prophets named Isaiah foretold that his arrival would be the dawning of a great light that would ultimately overcome the deep darkness found in the world. Isaiah chapter 9, verses 2 and verses 6 says, "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." A little over 700 years later, a young Jewish couple named Joseph and Miriam give birth to a child in the city of Bethlehem, and they call him the Hebrew name Yeshua, pronounced Jesus in our English Bibles. It means God's salvation. 30 years later, when Jesus is an adult, he declares in John chapter 8:12, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Now be honest, okay? Raise your hand if you currently are or have ever been afraid of the dark, okay? Come on, be honest here. Oh my God, I was so afraid of the dark when I was a kid. In fact, even though I'm not really afraid of the dark anymore, wink, I still have a habit of sleeping with my blankie over my head because that's how I slept every night when I was growing up. Anyone else sleep with their blankie over your head? Come on. Don't leave me here. Thank you. Thank you. You know, a dark bedroom can be a very scary place for a kid to navigate at night because it's filled with lots of potential danger. And don't you find it interesting how every kid ever born seems to instinctively know the three universal bedtime survival rules, right? Number one, we just said, sleep with your head under your blankie. That's a no-brainer. Number two, keep your closet door closed, right? Because if something's in there, it can't get out if your closet door is closed. And number three, don't ever dangle your legs off the edge of your bed because underneath your bed is just a pit to the dark world and it will grab you at any moment. And of course, if none of those things work, a nightlight will do just fine. Jesus says, "I am the nightlight of the world." And the reason he came into the world is so that none of us have to ever be afraid of the dark again. You know what I find really interesting, really fascinating about darkness is that we really can't create darkness. You can't create it. There's just no way to create it. There's no device that you can turn on. Like you can go into Home Depot, right? And you can get a flashlight like this. Is that a flashlight? And you can turn it on, and wherever you point it, it will dispel the darkness, right? But there's no flash dark. This just doesn't work. It won't do anything because there's no device that you can turn on and point it, and it will dispel the light wherever you point it. In the same way, if you open up the door of a dark closet, darkness won't rush out of the closet and displace the light in the room that you're in. On the contrary, it's the other way around. Light from the room rushes into the closet to dispel the darkness. And it works that way every time because darkness is always lurking around in the shadows. And the only way to get rid of the nasty stuff is to use some kind of a light source. Darkness is simply the absence of light. Think about it this way from the creation story. Just before God created the universe, we're told in the first couple of verses in Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning, that everything was in total and complete darkness because there was not yet any light source created. In other words, there was an absence of light, and without any light source, all you have is darkness. But then God says in verse 3, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God saw that the light was good. And this is our first hint that in this crazy story that God wrote called life, light and day will become metaphors for everything that is good and wholesome and safe and promising, and darkness and night will become metaphors for everything that is evil and scary and destructive and hopeless. We even have famous sayings about the contrast between them, like it's always darkest just before the, right. You might find yourselves trying to navigate through a dark tunnel, but no worries, because eventually you'll see a light at the end of the, right? Ever have a dark day of the soul? No, I don't think so. It's always a dark night of the soul, because bad things only happen in the metaphorical cover of darkness. And doesn't the Phantom of the Opera try to convince Christine to come out of the light and into the darkness by convincing her that light is really the bad guy and darkness is really the good guy? Come on, you can do this with me, right? Nighttime sharpens, heightens each sensation. Darkness wakes imagination. Turn your face away from the garish light of day. Turn your thoughts away from cold, unfeeling light. And listen to the music of the night. Oh, that sounds beautiful. That was our best carol yet. That's scary. In the beginning, there was no light, only darkness. God dispelled the darkness when he created light. And how cool would it have been if he would have done away with the darkness of night once and for all, right there and right then, but he didn't. The passage goes on to say in verse 4 and 5 that God simply separated the light from the darkness, creating evening and morning. And he calls the light day, and he calls the darkness night. And this is a literal description of a solar day that God established as the earth takes approximately 24 hours to make a full rotation on its axis in respect to the sun. But it's also a metaphor that we find throughout the entire Bible about how God made life a mixture of the beauty of light that is experienced during the day and the dreadfulness of darkness that we experience during the night. Which means that you and I and everyone else on this planet have to wrestle in the dark with the boogeyman quite a bit during our lifetimes. And we know that this is true. You just have to simply read the headlines in the news, or read the headlines maybe in your own life. I know in my life I can see the contrast between the two, because our lives are a mix of light and darkness. Some more light than dark, some more dark than light. But in God's infinite wisdom, he thought it best to write a story where both light and darkness have leading roles during the entire story. They're co-stars. And the big question is, why didn't God get rid of all the darkness in the world when he first created light? Years ago, when I was running a lot more than I run now, I used to run to the top of Green Mountain, which is just behind us. It's about an 8,300 peak. I used to run up it about once a week. And then one early during the summer, a little over a decade ago, Gil Dickinson and I, Gil is the one playing the keyboard right here, decided to run up around 5:30 p.m. Took us our usual about an hour and a half to get to the summit. When we got there, it was so beautiful. We just began to talk and pray and just gaze. And then I noticed that the sun had dropped behind the Continental Divide. And I thought, oh my gosh, we need to get down because it's going to get dark quickly. So we started going down. We didn't even get halfway down and it's pitch black. And we've got no cell phones. We've got no flashlights, no light source. And we're over 50. That's a bad combination. And Gil will tell you, it didn't take long. I was in the lead before I got off the trail, and we got a little lost. Now, obviously, we survived because we're both here to talk about it, but in the beginning of this crazy story called life, God gave light of day a leading role in the story, but he also left the dark of night as a leading role as well. They're co-stars in the story because both the light of day and the dark of night have the same amount of performance time. And this might sound a little counterintuitive, but listen to this. It's the role of darkness, not light, that helps us see our way to God. More often than not. You can be certain that after getting stuck on Green Mountain, I went out the very next day and I bought one of these bad boys. Is that on? No. Oh, well, that's the same trouble I had up there. There we go. Darkness can be scary and painful, and we can become hopelessly lost in it. But ironically, God left darkness in the story to help us find our way to him. He created a world that requires us to use a light source. And he's the only light source that can truly overcome the deep darkness that we find in our world and in our lives. This is why Jesus once said, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. In other words, it's like he's saying, if you're scared, if you're in pain, if you feel hopelessly lost, follow me. Because I alone can help you navigate safely through the darkness. I alone can illuminate your path, the one that you need to stay on. The Apostle John says it this way in John chapter 1, verse 1 and 5 says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So he's talking about Jesus here. He was with God in the beginning, talking about the deity of Jesus. Through Jesus, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made, including light, right? In Jesus was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And he goes on to say that many will reject Jesus and stay in the darkness. But then he says in verse 8, but yet to all who receive him, all who believed in his name, he gave them the right to become children of God, children not born of their natural parents, but of a human decision. Not of a human decision or the husband's will, but born of God. And then he ends it by saying the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. This is the Christmas message, isn't it? The Word became flesh and lived among us. Light has come into the world so that none of us have to be afraid of the dark. God himself, the creator of the universe, the creator of light, became flesh to live among us. Jesus, the light of the world, stepped down out of darkness, out of heaven into the darkness to shine a bright light on our path. And that path, my friends, is just simply called faith. And the worship team can make its way back out here now. It's faith. It's believing. Of course, Jesus said it this way in our passage, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Here at Cornerstone, we like to think of ourselves as followers of Jesus, followers of Rabbi Yeshua. Why? Because whoever follows Jesus will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life, even during the dark hours of night. But I want to share one more thing, and then we'll get back to singing and get these candles lit. And that is, even though God left night in the story, do you know that it's his plan to get rid of night eventually? He's going to get rid of it. In the book of Revelation, the Apostle John is given a sneak peek vision at what eternity is going to be like. How'd you like to have that? I'd love to have that. And in this vision, God shows him the eternal holy city called New Jerusalem. And of course, it's the holy city, so there's a temple. But it's not the kind of temple John expected to see, because the temple is not a building. The temple is God and Jesus. And remember from our Advent reading earlier how the menorah lights needed to stay lit in the temple all the time. It's the basis for the Hanukkah story. And how cool is it that this is the first night of Hanukkah and it's Christmas Eve all at the same time? How often does that happen? Not very often. It's a treat because Hanukkah and Christmas are related. They are both about the miracle of light that would come from a special menorah. That's why we put them here together. They're not two separate events. They're actually the same event, celebrating a foreshadow. Just as the menorah would stay lit in the temple 24/7, eventually the world will no longer have any darkness. Listen to it from Revelation 21:22. It says, I did not see a temple in the city because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb, that's Jesus, are its temple. The city does not need the sun or the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp. That's the word menorah. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. And this is the part I love. On no day will its gates ever be shut, for there will be no night there ever again. Is that cool? We won't have to keep our bedroom doors, closet doors closed anymore. No more boogeyman. No more darkness. No more night. Only the beautiful light of day. This is our hope. For now, we're stuck with evening and morning. And just one other detail. In fact, you can all stand. If you notice in Genesis, it says, and there was evening and morning the first day. It didn't say there was day and evening. There was evening and morning. First comes the dark, then comes the light. In Israel, it's still that way. Tonight is the first night of Hanukkah at sunset, because that's when the day starts. So in God's world, the day starts at night. You have to experience all the effects of nighttime, but it ends. It ends in light. So I thought we would kind of finish this with that pattern. Can we douse the room and have the ushers come up? Let's just get this as dark as we can. We'll keep these lights going, kids, so that it won't get too scary for you. Go ahead. And as they light your candle, light the person next to you and then turn around and light the person behind you as well. And there was evening, and there was morning. Beautiful. Let's sing it together, okay? Silent Night. Silent night.
Holy night. All is calm. All is bright. Round young virgin mother and child. Holy infant Son of God, love's pure light, radiant beams from thy holy face. With the dawn of redeeming grace, Jesus, Lord of thy birth, Jesus, Lord at thy birth.
Wow, you guys are beautiful. You sound beautiful. But I know that for many of you, as it is for us at various times in our life, that you feel like you're stuck in a tunnel, that it does feel dark in your life. But remember, it's always darkest before the dawn. And with the dawn of redeeming grace, God's love came down to earth to be a light for us right here and right now, to get us through this period of life that's called darkness. And so we're stuck with a little mix of light and a little bit of darkness, but through faith. And this is what this is all about, through faith. You can navigate that until the time that God comes to dispel the darkness once and for all, forever. Amen? Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. God bless you all. Let's blow out our candles.